Just want to say thank you again.
Thank you all for coming. All right, Mr. Walker, I believe you're up.
Yes, Chairman. Thank you. For this item concerns the Marina Grand on Riverside Drive, which we're all familiar with. And back on November 23rd in 2004, the City Commission approved the documents which really created the Marina Grand residential mixed-use plan unit development. And this is a mixed-use plan unit development that consists primarily of residential, but there is some retail component to this development as well. Over the years, the MPUD agreement has been amended several times, 7 times, and now this evening there's a proposal to make an 8th amendment to the Marina Grand MPUD. Paragraph D is titled Land Uses within the PD, and it addresses the area of retail that is in that particular development. We all know on the ground floor there's some retail development that as of yet has not been fully developed. And addressing that, the MPUD states that the street frontage retail would not exceed 16,000 square feet, and that it should be designed so as to encourage pedestrian access and capture vehicular trips within the development. We do have Exhibit A in your staff report, which shows the specific area that we're talking about. And the retail spaces have remained vacant probably for a variety of reasons, but one of the major reasons has to do with the lack of parking spaces that are able to accommodate the retail uses. Right now, out in front of the retail, there's approximately 25 parking spaces, and if you consider that there's maybe about 16,000 square feet of retail, that would require that there be 64 parking spaces to accommodate that. So while there is some parking that's available in the public park to the south, there's no guarantee that that would be available specifically for the retail spaces. So parking has been an issue. And the current owner feels that expanding the uses beyond just retail would help to lower the parking requirement and would help with regard to successfully getting the retail space used. So what they're doing is they're requesting to expand the uses to include upscale restaurant, bistro, and cafe uses along with interior private storage. Now, the interior private storage spaces would not change the external facade at all of the retail spaces. The bistro and the cafe do have the potential to change that. But at this point, we're dealing primarily, the biggest change at this point would be addressing the storage spaces. The interior storage spaces, the applicant is proposing up to 90 storage units, with most of them being about 5 by 5 in space, and there would be some units that would be 10 by 10. Most of the spaces, right now there are 486 residential units in the towers, so most of those spaces would probably quickly be used up by the residents of the towers. They would be given the right of first refusal. If after a while those spaces were not used, then the owners do want the ability to have those spaces occupied by folks who do not live at the Marina Grand. The applicant also, again, is proposing upscale restaurant and cafe bistro uses. Now, they have not provided any renderings or elevations of what those restaurant or bistro or cafe spaces would look like. So the applicant, again, has stated that it would be upscale in nature. Now, what staff did was look at some synonyms for the word upscale to kind of get an idea of what they were talking about. And some of these synonyms are deluxe, high-end, exclusive, top-end, prime, superior, upper class, classy, or ritzy. So prior to the permit approval for the restaurant, bistro, or cafe, the applicant will be required to submit renderings of the development to demonstrate to the city that they do indeed meet the intent of the word upscale. And if in the judgment of the city, the proposed restaurant, bistro, or cafe does not meet the intent of the word upscale, then the city will have the right to deny the approval of the requested permit. Now, in considering whether or not to approve the applicant's request this evening, one of the things is that the commission is going to have to consider whether or not the request is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan's element, future land use element, policy 1.1.2, addresses what can be permitted under the property's residential-based mixed land use. And part of that states that the residential-based mixed use, this category is established to encourage better integration of residential use and complementary commercial and other non-residential land uses. Now, the policy refers to the city's land use regulations, but it doesn't specifically mention for you restaurants or interior personal storage space. So one of the things that the Board of the Planning Appeals and the City Commission is going to have to do is exercise its judgment as to whether or not the proposed storage or restaurant uses are consistent with the residential-based mixed land use. But it is staff's opinion and judgment that the proposed uses are consistent with the complementary commercial in what is stated in policy 1.1.2, which says complementary commercial and other non-residential land uses portion of the stated land use. So based on that, staff is recommending that the City Commission adopt the ordinance amending the Marina Grande Residential MPUD, and this would be a major amendment, approved on November 23rd, 2004, to allow upscale restaurant, bistro, and cafe uses, along with interior personal storage for the retail spaces only, located at 235 Riverside Drive, parcel number 5334-34-06-0014. And that concludes this presentation.
Is there someone here from Marina Grande that would like to speak to this? Please come up and tell us your name.
Good evening. I'm Mike Panaggio, and I represent our group, myself and my partner, Tarek Nemo. Really, I think that Mr. Walker explained it extremely well. We've had meetings to discuss what we'd like to do at the Marina Grande. I mean, a little background is that I've purchased 4 units there. I was one of the earlier purchasers. I love the place. It's beautiful. The amenities are great, but you can't even buy a soda on the property. You can't get a cup of coffee. You've got to go out for everything. If you want to order takeout, literally, you've got to walk downstairs. There's just a lot of inconveniences that we'd like to solve. And it comes from not as an outsider, but as an insider. I know what's going on there because I have been involved with it for years and years. So when we say upscale, you're right. There's a lot of different things we can talk about with upscale. All I can state is that my reputation as a businessman in the area, I've always done a great job with whatever we've built. You know, there's a certain amount of pride in what we will do, and there's no advantage in building something that's inferior. I think this has got to be something that the Marina Grande residents will be proud of and that they'll accept, that the city of Holly Hill would be proud of to say, this is in Holly Hill. And to give you an example of what we would do with our, our coffee shop / bistro, we would be putting the coffee shop on one side, connected to the real estate office, and then we would put the bistro on the other side. And our goal is to, so you can see on the right-hand side would be the bistro area, and the left-hand side would be our coffee shop. And it's going to be a thing that we're all going to be proud of. And of course, I would expect that we would have permits required, and we could get your feedback on those. We're good citizens, and we want to participate properly. We don't want to go through what you just went through. Okay. So,
So I was going to suggest no horse carriages or anything.
yes, we don't want to beat a dead horse here. So, but whatever questions you might have, I mean, we will be compliant to the T. And it's going to be something that just makes sense for the community. This area needs development. It is a beautiful potential retail area. The only problem is we don't have parking. So I told Joe, and we talked to Brian about it, and Chris Villa, we don't really want to do storage. But storage allows us flexibility. And it also reduces the amount of parking that we're going to need to make this thing work. Because ultimately, as a business, you have to make the financial side work. And we think we can make the financial side work with a combination of the storage in the interior area, and then the bistro on one side and the coffee shop on the other side with the real estate office. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And I'll certainly take any questions.
Board, any questions for him? Yes, sir.
How many parking spots do you have there? 25?
I think we have 28 right now.
And you think for a bistro, an upscale bistro and a coffee shop, that's enough parking?
Well, it really isn't. If we're really doing well, it's not. But here's the thing. We believe that a majority of our business is going to come from the 488 units in back. Also, we believe that we're going to employ people from the Marina Grand. So, you need parking for employees, and you need parking for, your customers. And so, I mean, this is really it's going to be a challenge for us. And that's the reason that if we were to take the entire, as you said, 16,000 square feet and turn that into full retail, we'd have a mess.
Right.
We would have a mess. So I think this is a prudent way to do the business.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Please.
You're not able to use any of the parking garage for customers?
We'd love to. The problem is the homeowner association owns that,
Yeah.
and it causes a security issue.
I understand. I just,
But, yeah, that's a great idea. We wish we could.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anywhere else you could build additional parking on the site?
We're looking at some things. Now, we bought the property across the street as well, where the Mad Batter is, and a little bit of a mess back there. We're going to be upgrading that as well as we get our plans together. I just don't see that as being a great alternative for parking, but it could be possibly used for overflow parking. What I don't want to do is end up cause a mess. So we're going to have to limit the business somewhat, and that's why the storage area makes a lot of sense, because it doesn't require a lot of traffic back and forth. You may go to your storage area, once a month. That's if you're an outsider. Right. The people can walk to their storage area from the Marina Grand, and I think that's where we will sell out most of the usage on that.
Great idea.
Thank you.
So,
Sir.
Chairman, just to give some perspective, if you look at the 16,000 square feet, if that were to be all retail, they'd be required to have about 65 spaces.
Right.
And, I counted about 25, but, as Mr. Panagio says, there may be 28 out there. If they had in the bistro, let's say, 50 seats, it's one space for every 3 seats. So they'd be required to have about 16 spaces.
Okay.
If the cafe had 21 seats, it's the same seating arrangement, so they'd be required to have about 7 spaces. So the intensity of the parking is much less. And then, as Mr. Panagio says, when you consider that the center is going to be storage, that eliminates all that parking. And then if you had just 50% of the folks who frequent these, if 50% of the business came from people who are already on site, parking wouldn't be an issue at all.
I say 100% will be bought out from on-site.
I think you're right. I mean, we did a survey. My thing is, why guess when you can measure? So we did a survey of the entire Marina Grande population there, and they want storage badly. But they also are thrilled about having the coffee shop and, having a place where they can walk to, don't have to go anyplace. So it's really, I'm an insider, so I know that the convenience is going to be tremendous for the residents. And it's also, it's got to be something we're all proud of. It is not going to be, a down and dirty place. We're just serving coffee for 50 cents. It's going to be very nice. We believe it's going to be above a Starbucks look. We want to do something very special. That's what I like to do. I don't like to do anything halfway.
More questions for Mr. Panagio? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a designation as to how much square footage you're using for storage versus the other retail? And is it defined, if we pass it blanket and say, yes, we allow this, what would we be open to saying, okay, all the other businesses could go away and it's all storage? Or is there a designation to say, no, only a portion will be storage and another portion will always be retail?
Yeah, a portion of it's going to be storage. Let's say it's broken down into 9 units. The 2 end units, which are the ideal units, will be used for the bistro and the coffee shop. And we will, we don't have a mortgage on it. It's not going to be a real high cost to us we're going to have to build it out, of course, but the majority of the building is completed already. So to answer your question, there'll be 7 units. I believe 7 units would be storage, and then the 2 outside units are going to be the retail operation.
What are we talking about square feet? How many square feet are the 7 units?
About 9,000.
9,000, thank you.
For storage? Okay.
And these units are sort of units that we can get built rather quickly, and if need be, and things change, we can actually pull them out.
Okay.
And reposition them. If there is a demand or if something comes up where we end up with more parking. This is not our ideal situation. It's just something, how do we make the whole thing work? And the only way to make the whole thing work is to use the center for something that doesn't require parking, that'll be in high demand from the Marina Grande people. And then the other area is really what we can focus on. That's going to be where we need a lot of customer service and a lot of build out in that area. And you will see every single thing we do, and we'll make sure you're very proud of what we're doing. Guaranteed.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Chairman, just so you understand, right now, there is no limitation on how much storage there can be or how much restaurant. What's being requested is are uses, just a
Right.
blanket use. So if you want to limit the amount of square footage that can be used for a restaurant or that can be used for storage, then that's something that you need to do tonight. Because right now, the way it's presented is just use.
Right.
The whole front could be cafe and restaurant, or all of it, or all of it could be storage. There is that flexibility. So if you want to limit that and say that there's, a guaranteed amount that can only be for restaurant use and a guaranteed amount that can only be used for storage, then you need to put that as part of your motion this evening.
Thank you.
We have no problem with that at all.
What would be your recommended limits?
Well, I think that, as I said, we're not interested in doing the whole thing in storage. That's pretty non-creative. I'd say that if we broke it into 9 parcels, 2 of them would have to be true retail. parcels.
Outside too?
The outside 2. They're the ones that make the most sense, for us.
How much square footage is that?
I don't know exactly, but it would be, By
By the number, 7,000, right?
1,400?
1,400 on each side?
14 each side?
So would it, what we could add, if you're agreeable to it and the board agrees, that at a minimum, the 2 end units with a minimum of 1,400 square feet shall be used for either the cafe, coffee shop, bistro.
Yeah.
And a maximum of, so if you have 16,000 and we're using 2,800, that leaves you with 13,200? 13,200. A maximum of 13,200 square feet could be used for storage on the interior units.
I know. I think we understand what you're trying to get to, and I agree with it. We'll make sure that the square footage is exact.
Okay. I'm just trying to to
No,
address what you
I mean, in
asked.
theory, that's exactly,
Limits.
you're positioning it perfectly. The 2 outside units are going to be used for true retail, what we call true retail.
Right.
The interior would be for the storage. I don't know the exact amount, but we have no problem with that at all. That's
Well,
exactly
that's something
what
we can
want.
get between now and first reading before the commission.
I'm sorry?
We can get that information between now
Okay,
and
yeah,
first reading in the
we can
commission.
get that for you by probably end of meeting.
And what about the real estate? Didn't you want to add a real estate office there as well? Or just?
That's actually already there, and we're going to make that actually part of the coffee shop.
Okay.
So it's going to really be an extension. If you've been there, you can see that the real estate office is very well built. It's very nice. And so we're just going to extend that out that way. Whatever is that?
To the south.
Yeah,
Is that
To the north?
Okay. Yeah, to the north.
It's at the left end of the current retail, so there is a big.
Towards the gate.
Correct.
Yes, yeah.
There are 1,400 square feet, 1,450 square feet of space, real estate office space. Outside area, it's around 850, so this is where we established to put a small coffee shop. On the other end, on this side, the south side, as you can see, we're going to block the last section of the retail, including the outdoor area, and turn it into a bistro.
Outdoor seating?
Correct. And the coffee shop will have outdoor seating on the other end.
Great.
So a minimum of 2,800 retail.
Right now, we have 13,000 square feet of complete structure. The current structure has the ability to extend to 16,000.
Oh, okay.
So
13.
out of the 13,000 square feet, we have 1,450 as an office, real estate office. We have 11,050 of the remaining vacant. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the last unit, including the outside area, and turn it into a complete bistro, and everything in the middle will be for the storage. As Mike
Wait, hold on a moment. Mr. Passaggio, will you sit down and will you come up and tell us your name,
I
please?
was waiting for that.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tarek Nemo. I moved from London, United Kingdom, to Holly Hill. I moved to the Marina Grand in 2014. I helped in the sales. We sold about 209 units out of 486 units in this development between resale and brand new units. And we lived on site for quite a while. We all seen that the community has took forever to be sold out. And with every single person that came to the Marina Grand has complained about vacant retail space. So from my previous conversation with Michael Swerdlow and Brett Dill, who developed the community, I've asked them multiple times, can we do anything with the retail? They didn't want to lease any unit because they knew they had the challenge of parking. And they were thinking if we put anybody in this retail and he fails, it's going to fail the entire project and nobody will come anymore. So they kept it vacant all this time until they sold it to Daytona Grand LLC. Daytona Grand LLC, we worked together on selling the remaining inventory units at the Marina Grand, residential units. And then when it came to the retail, they called me a couple of times and they said, what can we do? Every time there is someone interested, he loves the community, he loves the idea of the retail. During due diligence, there is no parking. They pull out immediately. So Mike and I, we sat down, we love challenges, and we were thinking how we can overcome this challenge for the retail. I personally like the Marina Grand a lot. I lived there for a long time. I like Holly Hill. I like that we're close to the water. So we start communicating and see, okay, what can we do? As he said, we build a website, and we said, okay, we're going to try to come up with the best idea for the retail to make it functioning, because at the moment, it looks like just abandoned. There is no, it's a waste of space with the meaning of the word for 15 years. So we acquired the retail back in June, and during that time, I tried to do some survey. So we built a website, it's called Shops at MG, and we sent it to 486 units. We had about 605 click to the website. We had about 280 residents that they went with a survey. I have the full survey. I emailed it to Joe just now, and I emailed him a copy of how the bistro will look like. So from the survey, everybody has been complaining about storage. And the reason why it came number one on the survey, it actually brought my attention on what can we do with the storage. The biggest challenge and limit we have today, and that's why I don't want to have any more limits, is the parking. There is no parking. I tried to go with the Marina Grand owners to see if we can use the parking garage. They don't want any client to drive into the community, and I don't want either. It could potentially be used for an employee that's going to work in the retail, and we'll let him go through like background check to be able to park in the residential parking, but they won't allow any client to go through the gate. And logically, it doesn't make sense for anybody. If you want to go for a cup of coffee, you're not going to drive through a gate and have your ID. So I looked at the survey and I read almost 400 comments, tried to learn, and I have all this data here. People wanted to have the storage for a valid reason, which is, I'm just pulling the data here. Just last year, we had 189 scheduled move-in and move-out between sales and retail. Every single day, we had U-Haul and trucks parking outside the retail because people couldn't move within right time. And when you downsize into a condo, a lot of owners don't realize the downsizing. They bring all their belongings in, and there is nowhere to go. One time we had 3 U-Haul trucks parked outside this retail. So everybody has been complaining about the lack of storage. They can't even store their own Christmas lights, Christmas decoration, any like personal residential needs that you need to store it somewhere. There is no space at all at a Marina Grand. As a matter of fact, there is not enough parking for the units itself inside the parking garage. So I looked at the data and I said, okay, maybe if we use just the inside for the space into storage, that will eliminate or try to reduce the pressure on parking. Then in that case, we can have a bistro and a coffee shop, and we can bring traffic in. In the same time, we would be able to see how much we can open more retail. We're not fan of the storage, but it's the only solution today, because even financially, it wouldn't make sense to go build all this retail and nobody will go there or lease it or do any business. By having a storage, I can have it for a certain time, let's say 1 year, 2 years, as we have a lot of plan in this area. Within 2 years, I can take all the storage down and turn it into full retail once we figure the parking issue, which hopefully we will. But as of today, the only way for us to operate this retail is by having a storage. I need to have financial stability as well, and I need to make the owners at the Marina Grand have something useful for them. We're not really going to have a lot of trucks because they're 5x5 and few of them will be 10x10. It will be run by the most actually reputable storage company in town. We're not just going to open something and let it go like this. We're usually very organized in when it comes to business. And then in the same time, we're going to have these two ends. One, the real estate office, and then we're going to have the coffee shop outside. And then the last section of the retail will be the bistro. In that case, I have enough parking if someone come into the bistro, at least some sort of parking for them. But to turn it all into a storage, we don't want to do that. But I need to get some flexibility in the future to take it down, then we can turn it into a retail, as there are a lot of plans coming into town. If you have any question, please feel free to ask me. Sure.
Yes.
You said you use the south end, north end, bistro.
Correct.
Will you change the fascia on the front, like where all the glass windows are?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question.
At the end of the day, this is like, I don't want to let the character of the retail to go away. I just need to build something useful for the owners at the Marina Grand, and I need to create some sort of like financial stability because it's going to stay vacant forever. That's the only reason.
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am, go.
Just to define the motion that we're going to make, is 10,000 sufficient to say 10,000 square feet to zone for storage? Is that
Absolutely.
comfortable for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I
Is
need.
that
Thank you.
a minimum or a maximum?
Maximum?
Then 10,000 will be enough. And just
Maximum for storage
correct.
on the interior units?
Correct.
Well, the number that you had at 13,000 and less the 2,800 would be 11,200 square feet.
Mhm.
So I think if we set a minimum rather a
Say 12.
minimum on the retail, and then that'll let the storage float a little bit.
One suggestion I was going to have, Chairman, is, because we threw this out and we're throwing numbers around, is you could do a motion to say, we approve this with the direction for staff to come up with a minimum amount of retail that would be used at the north and south end units, with a maximum amount of interior space that could be used for storage to be agreed upon between the city and the developer as it goes forward from tonight, as opposed to trying to plug that number in tonight.
Yeah,
We
make
really
our
haven't
number.
talked
I like
about
that
it.
idea,
That
Scott.
sounds great.
I like that. I
Yeah.
think that's a good idea as well. What do you think, Robin? No? Okay. You can stop talking now if you want to.
Sure. Anyone has any more question?
I've got one more. Did
All right.
I understand that you say you were going to have an outside company manage the storage?
We will have a storage company that, they run storage. They're expert in storage companies.
Okay, thank you.
We want to run it like smoothly. We're going to have probably first right of refusal. We believe that the storage spaces will be occupied all.
I have friends that live there. I'm sure, I think 100% will
Will
be
be.
taken.
Yeah, I do too.
Great
So
idea.
that's the best, idea that Mike and we came
With 28 parking spots, great idea.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone that would like to speak? Heidi, Miss Heidi? No? All right. Okay. Well, no, you can't. I'm sorry, I'm kidding.
I can't say anything?
Yeah, no, come on.
Oh, come on. William Weeks, 241 Riverside Drive, Unit 1610. So I'm a resident in Marina Grand, and I am an architect by trade, and last year opened up an office in Daytona Beach, and now a pleasant resident of Holly Hill. These gentlemen, and my forte is hospitality, food and beverage, retail. And I've known this project for over when it was built, let me put it that way, because I've been around for 30 years in Orlando. And this, as all planners, we want to activate the streets. We want to put feet on the streets, and by activating the north and south corners of this venue with food and beverage, it will bring a little bit more foot traffic along that street which is, a lot of residents use that street in the mornings, in the evenings, in the afternoons, walk all the way up to Ormond, come back. So our goal is to enhance this area of the city. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? All right. Scott, would you repeat the recommendation, please?
Someone could make a motion approving the Eighth Amendment, subject to the city and the applicant working out a minimum amount of retail storage space at the north and south ends of the commercial complex for the cafe, bistro, coffee shops, and also agreeing to a maximum amount of storage space in the interior units.
I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second.
Second.
If you write it up, Scott.
I have a motion and,
That's her job.
I have a motion and 2 seconds. Is there any discussion?
No.
All right. Call the question, please.
Tony Casada,
Yes.
Loretta Arthur,
Yes.
Robin Hanger,
Yes.
Dennis Smith. Mike Meyer.
Yes. All right.
2 hours.
It's still daylight, though, for crying out loud.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. We have any old business? Well, wait.
Hold on, just a second. You typically want to know when they're going to city commission.
Yes.
And that is going to depend on them, because I just found out that you may not be around for the 10th.
Correct.
Okay, so do you want to go then at the second meeting in May, the 24th? It would be the it would be the fourth meeting in May, which would be the 24th, and then the second meeting in June would be the final meeting. The 24th of May,
And June 7th.
and then the second Tuesday in June, or the first meeting in June.
There's 2 readings, it's in order.
There's 2 readings. Does that work for you?
10th and 24th.
It will be 10th and 24th.
You can do the 10th and 24th, but if you're not going to be here, so you do want to go to the 10th?
May
I'm
10th.
not going to be here. I think Mike will be.
Oh, okay.
10th.
Okay, so then the 10th and the 24th.
And to make the agenda for the 10th, how quickly do you need y'all to work out that?
We'll work it out tomorrow.
Tomorrow? y'all
I'll
can work-
contact you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay?
I do have one more question.
Sure.
I was in London. I never met anyone with your accent in London.
Yeah.
I speak 4 languages.
I met Hans, and he spoke 7, and he still didn't have your actually, he had an accent very close to yours. He was German.
Right. When I came to Holly Hill, I was trying to go into sales and talk to people, and every time I speak with a rich accent, people look at me and say, "What? Say that again?" So I had to actually sit down. She was born in Ormond. She was born in Michigan and raised in Ormond Beach. So we worked a lot on adjusting the accent. But when I go back to London, I get it back right.
Do you? Okay. All right, thank you.
I never heard of an Ormond accent. I was born and raised there, too, so. I'm not sure what that is.
Well, you have it.
I guess.
I hope you like London when you went there.
So, yeah, it was very nice. We had a nice time. All right. Old business? Anything you want to tell us, Brian?
No, sir?
All right. I'll have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Funny is-
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hit the bricks.
Thank you.
Will you call the roll, please, Eleni?
Loretta Arthur,
Here.
Robin Hanger,
Here.
Dennis Smith. Tony Casada.
Here.
Mike Meyer.
Here. Join me in invocation. Robin, will you swear? Wait. We'll do the invocation first. I'll do the invocation first. Sorry. Lord, we just thank you for this day and time that you've given us. We pray that you will give us wisdom to make the best decisions for the citizens of Holly Hill. Pray all this in your holy name. Amen. Now you're up.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Has everyone had an opportunity to look the minutes over from our previous meeting? Are there any additions, changes? Anything? Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Our first agenda item. Mr. Forte, are you going to?
Well, let me start probably,
Okay.
and then I'll.
All right, please.
This is the first agenda item is a unique case. I don't think in the 20, 30 years I've been doing this for Holly Hill, we've never had this request before. This is a request for an accommodation to our land development regulations. Specifically, we have regulations that prohibit certain type of animals, which we define as wild animals, but which includes horses, from being located within the city limits. And we have someone who has put a horse in their backyard and has made a request for what's called a reasonable accommodation under the Fair Housing Act. That's where the reasonable accommodation comes under the federal Fair Housing Act, also incorporating some elements of the American with Disabilities Act. Several years ago, we did have a request for what's more of a common situation is what I'm going to refer to as sober homes, halfway houses, where people are addicted to drugs or alcohol or coming out through their addiction therapy, and part of that is transitioning back into normal living day to day, and they want to move into single-family neighborhoods, but they would violate our definition of family because of the number of unrelated people. So we had a request for that issue come up many years ago, and I drafted, because we didn't have anything on our books to help guide us through that process, and it was a request for a reasonable accommodation to allow a disabled person, and an addict is disabled under federal law. So it was a request for relief from our definition of the term family, and you'll see in the code section is 82-322, and it's called Evaluation of Requests for Accommodation Pursuant to the Fair Housing Act. That's in your agenda packet.
Okay.
It's a ordinance that we adopted in 2010 is when we first adopted it. And so that's why it's coming before you. We created a process, had some guidelines in it, and we created a process where this type of request comes before you to make a recommendation then to the city commission. This type of request has never come before you before. So it's truly a unique request, not just because of the particular circumstances, but I do not believe a request for a reasonable accommodation to the Fair Housing under the Fair Housing Act pursuant to that section I just cited has never come before this body before since we've adopted this ordinance. So it's the very first time it's ever come before you. And in there we talk about things that need to be submitted and talk about things that will be considered. And I will also, during this process, give you guidance on what the federal law says, because this is federal law. So I will give you guidance at the appropriate time on what the federal law says. This is a request by the applicant. The applicant bears the burden of proof to establish that they meet all the elements or requirements for a reasonable accommodation that they are asking for. And then, like I said, the specific request is we prohibit horses in Holly Hill. They are asking for an accommodation from that so they can keep their horse in their backyard. That's the accommodation they're requesting. I think the appropriate procedure, Chairman, would be to have the applicant go first, present their case. I know Mr. Forte, City Manager, has a response on behalf of the staff. Then I would request an opportunity to ask some questions to the applicant. And then you'll probably open it up for public comment. And then at that point, I think we would close public comments. Y'all can deliberate publicly and then come to a recommendation to the City Commission. But that's kind of the outline I think I would recommend you follow, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Thank you, Scott, yes, very
Okay.
much.
So I think step one would be for the applicant to come forward and to present their request and the evidence to support their request.
All right. Would the applicant come forward?
Is this the place here?
Yes, ma'am?
Yes, right there.
I did not do speech at Daytona State. I missed that class, so I hope that you can be patient with me while I
Yes,
speak.
ma'am.
Even though I did teach, and we do have curriculum that we make sales at conventions. My husband's the speaker. That's why the microphone is here. He's a coach. And he actually was supposed to be coaching our grandson's baseball game, and he did come home, but I said no. I had already talked to Gentleman Forte, told him I was going to be here myself, and so that's why I'm here. My husband's at home. We were on the phone together before I speak, and I want to thank y'all for hearing us.
Yes, ma'am. Will you tell us your name, please?
My name is Robin Lee Holmes Gamache, and again, I want to say thank y'all, and Hesed God kindness, blessings to you all. That is Hebrew for kindness, God, and that is, and you were praying, Gentleman Meyer, and very much appreciation about that, and thank y'all about all y'all's great and nice work here. Hesed is Hebrew for kindness, God, and that is in the power of the beauty of the holiness Spirit and all the fullness of Christ Jesus. The fullness of God is in him, that all sins are forgiven, and we can live heaven on earth now. Where I live at 1703 Anniston Avenue, Holly Hill, Florida, Volusia County, 32117, that is my little heaven on earth. I'm a Proverbs 31 woman. Bringing that into the New Testament, I'm also a Lydia woman. I work alongside my husband with our business. And then I like to look at each of the women in the Bible and the men, folk, and structure my life in that way. That includes livestock. Livestock is mentioned in Scripture, Proverb 12:10, that you care about the life of your animals. And it even goes so far to say that it is offensive to even eat meat in the New Testament, in Corinthians and in Romans. I have recently become vegetarian, but I wasn't always so. And that's where I'm at with that. To have our equine with us, we've had him since he was 3. And you're going to hear breathlessness in me on occasion. I was born this way. It did not become an emotional issue through COVID-19. The letter I'd like to present to you all from Dr. Neil Nipper at Florida Healthcare. He does state emotional situations in this, but the way our conversation went that day, the drive I had to take or drive to go to Port Orange to care for our animal, I say animal, but he's my pet. He is a companion, and we've had him since he was 3. He's 18, and we've been to a bunch of boarding facilities, equine professional rent, WREN capital T facilities in Volusia County, and each place is unique. That word I have much appreciation about. Almost to the point of being weird on occasion. I was threatened with a shotgun at one. My equine had oil on him that nobody made the request to do. He was left at the previous location where we rescued him and brought him in our back lawn. It's a double rescue. I just want to make that on the record. This is a double rescue. He was left in his indoors rent location on occasion for about 14 to 16 hours, 12 by 12 stall. And I'd show up there, and that wasn't what was supposed to happen. Along with the money situations, they did not honor their contracts that we signed originally to go into the situation for 5 years. We had a whole bunch of agreements that they reneged on. So it's financial, physiological, physical, companionship, pet, adoption. That's how I look at him. Along with my situation to drive an hour round trip and care for him. I was born a preemie. I was born 4 pounds, dropped to 2. I had to live in an incubator for, I think, a little more than a month. And when you do that, your lungs are underdeveloped. I think I was born at like 6 months. And you grow up with a natural anxiousness. There is scientific, I have looked it up. I didn't bring it with me. I didn't want to put too much out there for y'all to have to think about. But you are, as an adult, you grow, because as an elementary child, I had to go into the hospital, live like a bubble child, like that movie they had a long time ago. I had to live that way on occasion to develop my lungs. It causes me to have a natural anxiousness. There is a whole bunch of scientific evidence, even updated, that says that a person who was like myself, a bunch of us are out there, we grow up with a natural anxiousness, but it's a compassionate, empathetic, and very protective. Like, I can sense things in an environment and not a paranoia. I used to work for the public defender's office. I worked around criminals. I worked in the misdemeanor division. I worked in private attorneys as well, offices, like real estate, just a bunch of experience with attorneys, estates, real estate, divorces, a whole bunch of things. But the law office, you learn to have an appreciation of empathy to try to help people get out of trouble. Even though we'd get phone calls in on rotation, I was in misdemeanor. Serial killers calling in. I was talking to Gentleman Forte about that today. And so I've had to develop through, God has given me a whole bunch of experience with my breathing, with legal procedures, and how to make reasonable appeals. I used to type appeals for a living. And that is very detailed work. To go on with the anxiousness that I'm born with, to give me a very aware situations in my environment. It gives me empathy, it gives me a protective nature, and it gives me this physiological breathlessness on occasion when I speak, regular. Then I've developed, I had COVID-19, pneumonia. They almost put me in the hospital, but we were very blessed to have Regeneron, and did that procedure, helped me through it. However, that physiological with my lungs is there. When I get in a car, if I'm out and about too long, I need to get home. And I do have, and I didn't bring, the law says we don't have to give medical information. That's personal. But I don't mind sharing with you that I was given an oxygen tank that I had to not utilize, and I did read about it later, and there are people that cannot use it. So I'd highly suggest that if anybody ever gives you an oxygen tank, I'm not a medical professional, make sure and talk with your doctor. But I did look it up after, and there are certain individuals that cannot use those. I felt like I was going to get addicted to the tank. Somebody was talking about addiction. I really, and I had to put that away, but he did give me those breathalyzers, whatever that is, and I could breathe through that. And and a steroid medication, and that helped and helped get rid of the pneumonia. There's one other thing I wanted to say, and I have to think about it. If I do think of it after, who directs this? If I think about this after, may I interject that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So that's where I am with the physiological. I have to get home. He was 30 minutes there, 30 minutes home, driving. I get anxious in the car because of my breathlessness. And so I'm driving, trying to get there, and then do the things I need to do, and then I see what's happening when I'm there. And then, so it's really, like I say, it is a dual rescue. He is a companion for me. Dale now does the traveling for our conventions. And because we sell our curriculum to homeschoolers, we have a curriculum that we've developed on DVD. and very blessed to do this for near 22 plus years. So we do this from home, so I can work at home, have my equine companion specific with me there, and I know he's safe, and I know I'm safe, and I'm not on the road, and I can do the things that I need to do. Gentleman Forte has a very good question about him being an equine and me being around that environment. I want to do that anyway. We made the adoption. I call it an adoption because that's the way I look at him. That's the way I've looked at my dogs. And we rescued a bunch in our Holly Hill neighborhood. For whatever reason, they liked showing up at our house. And one of them had a chip, so we were able to locate them. But there's a lady in the neighborhood that we used to do that. So I'm very empathetic about those kinds of things. It's good to have him there. I see he's safe, I'm safe, and I get to be home and work from our house. I have a letter from the doctor that, if y'all would like to look at this, I didn't make multiple copies. I was going to do that, and I thought I just
Is that the
would.
one that's in the agenda?
It is.
And I did give this to Gentleman Forte.
Yeah, it is. I think everybody has
Everybody
it.
has a copy of that? Okay, and I also have from the Florida, I did look up, and I did give him information from a synopsis writer, journalist, about the law. And then there's a law firm in West Palm, Pembroke area that has the specifics on the law in Florida. And I have that, how to look at the law. Again, as my husband was telling me, the law does say, there was a question about whether I needed to go to an emotional counselor. This isn't an emotional issue, this is a physiological. And I did have to go into those plastic bubble tents growing up, and so that's where I'm at with this again. I've had to have the medication. I don't have to, at this moment, I have to say this is a very cool thing. I was I'm 5'3", a little under 5'3". I had gained over 200 pounds, and I didn't go on the scale, so I really didn't know how much I weighed until I went in for COVID. And I topped the scale over 205 pounds. I had never weighed that in my life. Even when I was pregnant with my daughter, I never got that high in my weight. My blood pressure was off the charts. Not literally, thank God, but it was very high, and I was able to, since Rock's been here, I was able to, before Rock got here, I began to exercise and do all those things, and I was doing that before COVID, and then COVID happened, and then all that, and then I got the flu after, where I was throwing up like 30 days after COVID, so I was sick for like 3 months, and then trying to get to Rock, and it was just a bunch of things, a bunch of pressure all at once. So I recouped from that and went to see the doctor, and he said, you really need to, he asked me about counseling, and I said, I read books, and I have Christian books on counseling, but I do it for the encouragement, because I'm an encourager. That's one of my gifts, one of my spiritual gifts. And so I was reading that book on menopause, and women of the Bible, and the Bible, of course, and just regular information that anybody should have, especially in this situation, and more, of course, and I thank God for that and the ability to do it. I lost 20 pounds within 30 days before Rock got there, and now I'm at 30 pounds, and so he has helped me. I am getting in very good shape. I have a machine, or a thing that I have a recumbent cycle that I don't have to pedal, you just push it. So I do that, and then I'm outside with him, and I clean poop. So if anybody has a question about poop, I put it in industrial bags, and I clean about maybe 7 times a day. And I was trained, living as a child in North Carolina, I knew equines there as a young girl. And then moving to Florida, I used to trail ride out near where Walmart Supercenter is. They used to have, all that wasn't out there. Oh, and the thing about equines in Holly Hill, when I moved on 1703 Anniston Avenue, where I am now, we built our house in 1983. We're the only residents there. When I moved in, Doc, the vet on Mason Avenue, what's his name, Langford, or Doc, whatever the vet's name is there, he had equines on the land that is now a huge retention pond, and there's condominiums and things there. And they're also there at Bishop's Dairy. It used to be Bishop's Dairy. There used to be an equine there because I used to bring my daughter in a wagon, and we'd go visit that equine. So there were equines. I could sit on my front porch and look at the equines in between the duplexes. That the vet, he's on Mason Avenue. He had them there. And
That was Dr. Langford. you're
Dr.
right.
Langford,
Yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
he's an acquaintance of my husband's, and he actually, I'm hoping he's going to be our vet. He has given us things for Rock, so he knows, my husband has given us supplies for him. So I have a support system. If anybody has a question about that, I have a support system for him. And in Florida, trail ride out there, and then Rock and our family, we're on trail. Like, we traveled the country with him, actually, and settled back in Florida. Programs and the people we bought him from, that's what they wanted to do. But he never was a show. She called it trail, and she was teaching him to do that, but that's what I learned in Ormond. And so I know how to care for him, been around it all my life, and we've had him since 2007, and he was 3 at the time, and he's 18 now. He had to have surgery almost right away after we bought him. So he's no trouble as far as running around or making a lot of loud noises like, Barker dogs can do, because I've owned them. We had a rescue dog of a hound, and that dog howled and howled and howled and howled and howled. And they said they'd do that. It wasn't mine. I didn't purchase him, but he was a rescue, and then they found a nice home for him to be outside. So he doesn't make loud noises. He talks like he does the whinny, and I do sounds to him, that, the communication that we have. And it's a thing that we've learned, through these years of our being companionships alongside each other. And you do have a bond. Dogs have that characteristic of loyalty. He is no dog, but he is loyal. And he is gentle. He's very tall. He's 1,350 pounds. But the size that we have and how I've learned how to care for equines over the years, I know how to do that and make the place in a way, and I thank God for that he's comfortable and he's fine. If I think I need to purchase more land, I want to tell y'all that I'm open to that. I don't know, what the proceedings, because I think there's more after this, more days after this, I think, more meetings. So, I'm open to suggestions, but he is behaving, he's safe, and I'm safe, and I've learned how to be safe around equines. It does take a skill. I mean, anything can happen, but they're huge. And I'm talking about between me and him. We have double fencing, double gates. I have like 5 gates. And if y'all need to send a person out there, I'd like notification beforehand to make an appointment. But if you'd like to see, how the situation looks, safety-wise, cleanliness-wise, the processes that I go through each day, there is a system to it. And it's very logical, it's very reasonable. And I'd be willing to, whoever would need to do that, that'd be fine. You have an open invitation. But once, I don't, want to keep a process going. I'd like a decision and a person to come and look and see what they think before anybody, whether it's at this meeting or the next meeting, makes a final decision, however that system, however this works. You do have an open invitation specific to do that, to be our guest. And you have the letter. I do have these things here, the health benefits of having a companion that I explained, that my personal situation I'm so happy about. It's helping me very much. And I would like to say, if you do come, no photography. I have 2 neighbors, one to the north of me and one to the south of me, that have taken pictures of our property or have had people on their property taking pictures. I'm not real sure how the situation was. I was told that one of the photographs came up on screen. So I don't know if that person took the picture or if they had a person or if there was an invitation to do it, or I don't know how that was. I don't think it's legal, but I was researching it and looking. So if you do come, no photography, because I don't think it's necessary. Which reminds me, if anybody does show up, our neighbor to the north actually lives between me and Mayor Villa. Mayor Villa lives one house north. There's a house in between us. And that neighbor has, for whatever reason, like within 2 days recent, has put 2 skull heads up on 2 sticks that are facing in our direction. And I have no idea why. I mean, we all need bones, right? But it's unusual. So I just want to let you know that, okay? And the thing is, I don't know if anybody has a suggestion maybe after the fact, because he was videoing and taping us. I did see him do that with his phone. And I don't know if anybody can put cameras. I know people have a attraction to that kind of thing, so I don't know if anybody could give me advice after the fact about that, if there's a way to go into that without causing a scene, because I'm not that kind of neighbor. I don't want to be that way. I don't want to be in anybody's personal business, and I don't want them in mine. So if anybody has a suggestion about that, I appreciate that very much. And I have these from the attorney in West Palm. Yeah.
Is that the same stuff you already,
These are new. These are from an attorney in West Palm. That lady was a journalist.
okay, because I know there's some information you previously provided that's in the agenda.
Yeah. Would you like these?
If
For the
it's some
record?
information we don't have, then yes, we'll need them.
Yeah, it is. Who do I give this to? Thank you. Thank y'all. Have a great next day.
Thank you.
Mr. Forte, whenever you're ready.
All right. I'm going to go through a lot of documents with you. Scott already started with some of it. But I want to start out with what a reasonable accommodation is. By statute, it's an accommodation is a change, exception, or adjustment to a rule, policy, practice, or service that may be necessary to have an equal opportunity to use and enjoy a dwelling, including public and common use spaces, or fulfilling their program obligations. That's what a reasonable accommodation is defined as. So the reason we're here is because the city's Code of Ordinance has a section that talks about permitted principal uses and structures, or those that are agreed upon by the city commission and are dependent upon which subclassification is requested. So the property that Ms. Gamache lives, Mrs. Gamache, correct? Okay. I got in trouble earlier. Is a residentially zoned single-family dwelling. And the policy, the city's code says the following uses shall not be permitted: raising and/or keeping large animals, including horses, burros, donkeys, cows, and oxen, except as may be permitted in conjunction with an approved special event; raising or keeping roosters, peacocks, and other crowing or crying fowl, or kennels. Those are prohibited in the single-family residential zoning. So what happened was, in the beginning of March, I received a phone call and then a visit from Dale Gamache, because Robin they had brought a horse onto the property and they were seeking a reasonable accommodation. At my first meeting with him, I didn't have any experience or knowledge of what a reasonable accommodation was, not a lot of knowledge on what an emotional support animal was, so I told Dale at that time that I didn't have any information, that I would do some research and ask for him to get back to me. So he did, and I did my research, and I met with Dale on March 16th, and I provided him with a letter, and in that letter gave him a certain amount of criteria. It explained what our Code of Ordinance was and explained what we were looking for. And even in the document that we were just provided, I'm going to hopefully try to bring documents up on the screen for you to see. Okay, so this is the document that I was provided by Ms. Gamache. And in here it says that documentation from a government, we're talking about a disability. All of this comes under the ADA, HUD, and Fair Housing Act. So it all falls under a disability and proof of a disability. So it says and it also refers mostly with regard to a person looking for a place to live and having to deal with a landlord or a housing authority, that for the most part, there's a no pet rule. And because you have the need for an emotional support animal, you go through this process to be able to have a pet on premises, typically a dog. They'll have no pets allowed, and somebody says, I need to have an emotional support dog, and the housing authority has to then allow you to have that animal on premises. Then we'll go into another section that talks about unique animals, which is where we are here. But under the documentation that we were given on new laws for ESA and housing, if the tenant's disability is not apparent, then they may be required to give additional supporting information to confirm their disability for an ESA to live with them. The documentation from a government agency, an ESA letter, information from a healthcare provider, and other forms of evidence are permissible. The information that I provided to them was with regard to an ESA letter. And the ESA letter is kind of important because that is what's been considered best practice. So in my letter that I had, in my letter that I had provided, and I provided it to Dale, not to Robin, because Dale is who met with me. I gave him all the information, talked about the unique animals, and then there was the criteria that I had asked for. Give me a second to find it. Okay, so the state of Florida does not have a emotional support animal registry, but they do recognize, as I just showed you in the document that was provided to me, the emotional support letter. And within the emotional support letter, there are things that are, I don't want to say required, but preferred. And in that letter, it should say that, that there is a mental disability that is in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, that the identified condition substantially limits the person's ability to participate in at least one major life activity. The professional has to determine that the emotional support animal, the horse, would help treat the condition or ease the symptoms, that she will need to get an emotional support animal letter, which can be thought of as a prescription from an ESA. The letter must come from a licensed medical health professional. The letter must be on the therapist official letterhead, and the letter must include the therapist license details, issue date, and state. Now, what you do have, what was provided was a letter from the doctor from the clinic at Florida Healthcare Plans, which makes no reference to any mental health disability. It does mention, as was stated, emotional and anxiety. Well, emotional and anxiety doesn't fall into that ADA criteria. Yes, it does. As prescribed by a doctor, where it is determined under the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's not mentioned in here. So that's a requirement for an emotional support letter. So the responsibility of the person making the request, they have the burden of proof to convince you that they fall under the ADA requirement and the Fair Housing Act in order to have this reasonable accommodation offered to them. All right, let me pull up another document. It's coming. It's thinking. Nope, it's not the right one. Okay, so this document is the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and it deals with the Fair Housing Act. And I just want to call your attention to a section in here that talks about unique animals. Now again, the whole point of this, like Scott mentioned earlier, our process for allowing for Fair Housing Act reasonable accommodation was established and dealt with people that were trying to move into homes that either needed to have more unrelated people, or maybe they were treatment homes or halfway houses, you might think of them as, and we had to create an accommodation to here for the reasonable request. Again, here's the definition of what a reasonable accommodation is. It's the same as what I've read to you earlier. But what's important, again, is when people typically ask for this, they're asking to allow a horse or similar, a dog or a similar animal to be in a regular home or housing or development where they have no pets allowed, and this would allow them because it is an emotional support animal. So under the unique animal criteria, here's some of the things, and these are just examples of what a person has to be able to prove. And the first thing is that the animal is individually trained to do work or perform tasks that cannot be performed by a dog. Well, that doesn't exist in this case. That the information from a healthcare professional confirms that allergies prevent the person from using a dog. So in other words, you start at the dog level as your emotional support animal, and if that doesn't work, then it goes to something else. Without the animal, the symptoms or effects of the person's disability will be significantly increased. Well, we haven't heard anything from Mrs. Gamache that the horse actually decreases her symptoms. What we heard is that she doesn't want to drive the 30 minutes to visit the horse, that it's emotionally related and not mentally related, which is not what the intent of this is. And the last thing is that the individual seeks the animal outdoors at a house with a fenced yard where the animal can be appropriately maintained. That's the only thing that we've heard, and there's even debate as to whether or not this residential property has enough square footage for that horse to move about comfortably. We haven't done our research to find out how big of a property a horse needs to roam. I think that's the responsibility of the applicant or the person making the request. So in response to my letter asking for that criteria, the only thing I got back from Mrs. Gamache was the letter from Dr. Nipper, and then also a document of how to apply online for disabilities, which was another criteria that as long as you are diagnosed with by either a state or a government agency that you have a disability, then you would fit under that criteria. In Florida statutes, it does mention that only a doctor's note is needed, but when you read all the details of that, what they're talking about is in a typical situation where someone has a visible disability, that a doctor's note would apply. When you have this disability that is not visible and not known, there's additional criteria in order to define what that is and to be able to justify that it does fall under that ADA requirement. And then lastly, it's just page 12, okay. Okay, so that's where we're at. I think we should be able to open it up for questions from the board, either from me or from Mrs. Gamache, as to whether or not we have enough information to grant a reasonable accommodation.
Thank you, Mr. Forte.
If I could probably add to what Joe said, in the court cases I've looked at, when you evaluate a reasonable accommodation, they basically look for 4 criteria. Was that? What are you pointing to?
Microphone a little closer, please.
Oh, okay. They look for 4 criteria, and it's the applicant has a disability or handicap, that the property owner, landlord, governmental agency, depending on who the reasonable accommodation is being requested to, is aware of that disability or handicap, that a reasonable accommodation has been made that will alleviate the effects of the disability to allow the applicant to enjoy and use their home as someone who doesn't have a disability can do. And then 4th, the reasonable accommodation is denied. The reasonable accommodation request is denied. So the last one going through the process of whether or not it's going to be approved or denied. The first one about the disability, it's broadly interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court when they got into the ADA and the Fair Housing Act. They said, look, what is a disability needs to be broadly interpreted, and it needs to be looked at from does it impact a life activity? I think it's questionable with this particular, without a doubt it's questionable, but what I want to focus on is, there's no question we know now what her situation is, so I want to focus on 3. And 3 says, a reasonable accommodation has been made that will alleviate the disability to allow the applicant to enjoy their home and use their home as someone can without a disability. That's the criteria I want to focus on, because I didn't hear anything mentioned to that effect. What I heard was, it caused her issues to drive to go visit the horse. There was also financial considerations involved in that, and it sounds like the care the horse was getting were involved. But I didn't hear anything that the applicant is unable to use her house without the support of the horse. Let me give you an example where you might see this when it's not an animal. Say somebody is handicapped in a wheelchair, and they need a wheelchair ramp to access their home. They go to construct the wheelchair ramp, and the wheelchair ramp extends into the setback requirement of the local government. So they can't build in compliance with the city's regulations the wheelchair ramp. They may not qualify for a variance. As y'all know, a variance, you can't get it for a self-created hardship. So this may be a self-created hardship. You're asking to build something into the setback. So that's where an accommodation, reasonable accommodation, may be through the ADA and the Fair Housing Act. See, I understand this is coming through the Fair Housing Act. This is to avoid discrimination in housing. So the applicant who's in a wheelchair may request relief to extend the wheelchair ramp into the side yard setback as a reasonable accommodation, because otherwise that applicant who's in a wheelchair cannot get into their house, cannot access the house. There you're tying the disability to the house and the request that alleviates that disability and the inability to use the house. You tie those things together. You see that with seeing eye dogs to help people around in their house. You see that with dogs, people who are deaf, to help them hear. They can't hear, so they use a dog to give them notice that there's noise at the front door or whatever the case may be. But that's what I didn't hear was from the applicant in this case, I have a disability, and that disability causes me not to enjoy my house or use my house. And by having the horse on the property, it alleviates that disability. I can now use my house as someone who doesn't have a disability can. That's a requirement. It's a very narrow review what we're doing here. This isn't, I don't want to sound harsh, this isn't about convenience, this isn't about niceties, this isn't really about what you want. It goes down to that very narrow issue, because we are dealing with the ADA and the Fair Housing Act. So it's a very narrow burden of proof that they have to establish. They have to establish there's a disability, and that disability prevents them from enjoying their house as someone without a disability could. And having the reasonable accommodation helps alleviate that disability. You also have the question of, is it reasonable? Is it a reasonable accommodation? The applicant, she indicated how big the horse was. Pretty sizable animal. The lot, I believe, is 75 by 125, the entire parcel. The area where the horse is confined is smaller than that. As Joe indicated, we're not horse experts. We're trying to say, is that really appropriate for the horse to have to to be able to move around and live properly. But is it a reasonable request to put a horse there? As opposed to other types of animals, and Joe touched on that, with, you typically see it progressive. Well, does a dog work, or you're allergic to dogs? The only reasonable accommodation I've been able to find in doing my research with a horse are miniature horses, not full-size horses. And if you go to state law, it allows a reasonable accommodation, so it's been identified as a reasonable accommodation, to be denied, and this is under Florida law, if there's a potential of a direct threat of injury, bodily injury, or property damage. This is a very large animal. We all may have heard stories of horses, hurting people or damaging things. I'm not a farmer or farm boy or country boy, but I've been around horses a couple times, and it always seems I always walk behind them and I get yelled at every time I walk behind a horse. So my focus has been, since I first talked to Joe, is the reasonableness of this request and meeting the elements of how does this help her with her disability in her house so that she can use her house. I can understand what she said. It's very convenient. It may be hard for her because of her condition, the anxiety to drive and to drive back, but that's outside the house. I haven't seen any evidence that supports that one element that is necessary. And I think, from my perspective, that's the information that's missing. And even if it was there, I don't know that the request is reasonable. I don't know that we've exhausted other potentials to alleviate this disability with other types of support animals. And then there's also the state law that says if you have a potential direct threat of bodily injury or property damage, it can be denied. So you got 3 levels there. I think that we still kind of need to work my way through in my head as advising you steps that need to go through. So I just wanted to add that to follow up what Joe said.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. We'll open, we'll open this up to public comment. First, we will hear people that would like to speak for it. Would you come to the dais? For it. Yeah. Okay. For it. Thank you. Excuse me, come to order, please.
There used to be equines on my land.
No, stop. Stop. Come to order, please. You can't speak unless you're recognized. Simple as that. Okay? All right. And I've opened the floor to someone who wants to speak for it. So is there anyone here that wants to speak for it? Because
I guess I'm going to speak because I don't
no. Well, speaking against comes next.
I'm not.
Oh, you just would like to speak? Well, then come up and speak. Tell us your name. And
My
where
name's
you're from.
Mary Nichols. I live at 1715 Anniston Avenue, 2 doors down from them.
Yes, ma'am.
Lived there for over a decade. And I've owned horses since I was 2 years old, up until about 4 years ago when we lost our last horse. I also am one of 3 ladies who run a dog rescue and pet food pantry in Volusia County that's pretty large, so I'm an animal advocate, and I feel like I need to speak on this. I have questions about all of this. Obviously, living 2 doors down, as everybody else does. I don't live next door to it, so I don't really have those same concerns that the people next door do, but they're valid concerns.
Okay.
I guess I can understand both sides of this situation because there are horses that are abandoned and abused and neglected all over the state of Florida, and they don't get the luxury of, of being well taken care of. However, I don't necessarily know is that a yard is a place for a horse to live, and I just am curious if there is shelter for the horse, what kind of accommodations, I don't know. Do I ask her directly, or?
No.
No.
You don't.
Okay. You know, that would be a question that would be a huge concern, like, is there shelter for the horse when it storms? What happens when there's neighborhood fireworks going off, which is a whole other issue? You know, what's going to happen then? Because a horse is capable of knocking down a fence, 2 fences. You know, those are all things that I would love to know.
Well, maybe you'll hear some of it.
I'm sorry?
I said, maybe you will hear some of it. Some of
Okay.
those answers, we'll see.
Okay, so, I mean, I just think that, well, it's not an ideal situation. You know, I think that it could go either way, but I certainly am concerned about the smell of horse manure, you know, all of those things, just like everybody else on the street is. So
Yes, ma'am.
that would be a concern.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very
All
much.
right, thanks.
All right. If there's no one else that would like to speak for, I will entertain folks speaking against. Please come up, tell us your name, where you live.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Neil Gushu. I live at 1701 Aniston Avenue, which is on the south side of this individual's home.
We didn't, excuse me, we did not interrupt you when you were speaking. Please,
Make the record clear that it's a couple there.
ma'am,
My wife and I.
it's okay. We didn't interrupt you when you were speaking. Please do not interrupt others when they're speaking. Thank you. Go ahead.
As to what I've heard so far since I've been here, I don't even really know how to respond. I initially had several things I just wanted to make quick comments about and then sit down. But first and foremost, her little heaven on earth is making ours a little bit like hell on earth with this animal next door to us. I myself also am
Excuse me.
disabled.
I'm sorry. Ma'am, you're out of order. Okay, now you may continue.
I'm just saying it's become very difficult for my wife and I to enjoy our backyard, to enjoy our home, to enjoy our little piece of heaven, as she stated earlier. In fact, our dog has developed allergies at this point. My wife has allergies that are now exacerbated. I'm a retired respiratory therapist, so I know what this is all about. I'm also a veteran, 90% disabled, all kinds of whatever, if you need any kind of information on that. And we just like to end this ongoing, I feel like it's a tragedy for us, and just, I'm confused. I mean, I don't usually get involved in city government, where we kind of stay to ourselves, but I'm learning a lot. I learned a lot about the ADA, I learned a lot about horses, I learned about the state of Florida and how they deal with things. And from what I can grasp, that she has said she has not met any of the conditions, and I'm still kind of ill at ease as to know what exactly her condition is. If it has something to do with breathing, as a retired respiratory therapist, they have, I hate to bring it up, they scream at each other from the backyard and the front yard. So usually in respiratory, when a person can scream, they don't have any breathing problems. So I don't know what her condition is. And what I seem to see at this point too is that they may be using this horse as an excuse to not pay the stable where this horse was once kept. We've only moved in next door to this woman and her husband roughly 4 years ago, dear, something like about 4 years ago. Now, I was introduced to this gentleman. He came to our door on his own and more or less introduced himself, told us who he was, and his wife's name was Robin, and that was that. And this gentleman seems to think that he's grandfathered into the neighborhood. The home we bought is apparently one of the original homes, and the man that I bought it from was the original owner. And this gentleman seems to think that there's no rules that apply to him. He does not take out permits for all the things that he's done. He literally dragged his yard waste one day, which the city picks up, which I couldn't understand. I'm sitting in my living room and I'm watching him drag trees and branches across the front of my house. I have an empty lot next to me, which I maintain the front of. Drag it across and then dump it in the lot next door to me. So I went, wow. I went out there and I said, excuse me, Dale, but what are you doing? He said, oh, he says, well, when we first moved here, this used to be a swampy area and had all kinds of water. So the people that first moved in here were throwing all their waste there to try to fill it in. And I thought, well, this is like 2000 and something. I think that at this point, the lot is fine. So I said, I don't think it's necessary to do that anymore. And he took offense to that. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I don't think you need to do that, especially being that the city will gladly pick it up.
Let me interrupt you, please. We have 3 minutes, and you've exceeded it.
Excuse
So
me?
we have 3 minutes. You have exceeded it. But if you,
Oh, I'm
if you would,
sorry.
I know, you didn't know, I didn't tell you. If you'd like to summarize, please do.
Summarize, yeah, it's making our lives rather miserable. And I don't feel as if that I should have to go
All right.
up with this.
We just changed our rule for the evening. Mr. Walker asked us if we could go 5 minutes, and
Typically at 5 minutes.
It was 5.
it was
It
5.
was 5, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, yeah. Well, I knew we exceeded 3. So, all right. I think we'd have to have a vote on whether you could actually exceed 3, since we agreed to 3 before. So if you finish your summary, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt you.
Summarize, I'm just saying it's making our lives rather miserable. We cannot enjoy our home nor our backyard, and we're just not enjoying our life now. I mean, I'm retired now, and I would just like to enjoy my life and my home. And this
Chairman,
is just
could I ask-
not
All right, thank you.
necessary.
Can I ask him a couple questions?
Yes, you
Just
may.
a little more specific. You indicated that you cannot enjoy your backyard, which is a conclusion. I was like, is it factually, I know you said there's allergies, your dog has allergies, your wife allergies got worse. Is there a smell issue, a noise issue? What specifically
Well,
is causing
as she
the problem?
stated, the horse is big horse. This horse can actually look over the fence, okay, into my backyard, okay? This horse is a very big horse. The fence he has put up, if this horse wants to, he can knock it down, okay? He can go through it.
So may I ask a question then?
You asking me?
Do you-
You're chairman.
So you feel threatened because that big horse is just on the other side of the fence?
Well-
that you're not sure is capable of restraining it?
I'm a dog person, okay? So I never was a horse person, and I've never, whatever, but my few run-ins with horses weren't exactly pleasant, okay? 1,300 pounds, she said this horse is.
That's right.
When they moved it in, I nicknamed it Seabiscuit. It looked like a thoroughbred, I mean, so, and, I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but, yeah, it's making our lives miserable, and yes, I feel threatened by the horse. He could knock down that fence at any time, and, if I'm sitting out there on my porch, which we don't do much anymore, yeah, it could become a serious problem.
So she's indicated that she cleans up the manure quite frequently. Is there a smell issue at your property? Is there a smell issue at your property?
Yes.
And does the horse make noise? More than a dog?
It does horse things, yes. I don't know what you would say. It whinnies and it does whatever it does.
But it does create a smell that you smell from your property. That's,
Yes.
okay.
We have friends that own horses, and we talked to them about this, and they said, not only does, you got the smells and the horses, and it's coming into the other thing, it's coming into the warmer months here. It's only going to get worse.
Right.
They also draw vermin and other things. It's bad enough I've already got the empty lot next to me with raccoons, and the lady across the street who feeds the cats, which is also feeding the wild raccoons, so I got raccoons around too, so. I just, like I say, I'm new to the neighborhood, and he introduced himself like, this is how it goes. You don't need permits for this, you don't need permits for that. This is Holly Hill, they don't have permits.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
I don't know what else to say. I'm kind of taken aback out of all the information, and I just couldn't see what she presented as being legitimate.
Well, thank you for speaking. We appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment on one thing that Scott had brought up, if you don't mind. We did receive note from Waste Pro that they will not pick up that horse manure anymore because they consider it biological waste, and that's not what they collect, so there'd have to be an alternative collection.
And I would point out that the poop is only half of the aroma issue. Horse urine is a very strong smell, and it's just you're not picking that up and carrying it out. All right. Yes, sir. Would you come up and tell us your name and your address, please?
My name is Roger St. Ange. I live at 1705 Aniston Ave, North resident. So basically, again, I'm going to create what...
Ma'am?
Can I ask one question, please?
No, wait.
Just
don't
one
ask it yet.
question.
Just don't ask it yet. Oh, you were about to say something.
She doesn't want to be here while the immediate neighbors speak, so she's stepping out and...
Okay.
Is that legal, or is that something that the
You're
meeting...
here talking to the board.
Anybody can get up and leave anytime they want. You might make me unhappy.
All right.
I haven't thrown anything at anybody.
All right, so again, I'm going to just reiterate what Neil said, Dale basically, is Godfather. Whatever. He's also had issues with, again, permits, sheds, fence lines. Has he gotten a survey for it? I don't think so. He's been there 40 years. Probably needs to get a survey of his property. The horse. My bedroom's 10 feet away from the trash bags. Stench is horrible. Humid, water, multiplies it. It's horrible. I'm done. For 2 years, I've been a good neighbor. That's when I bought the place. Haven't heard anything from them. They do their arguing inside the house. Now it's outside the house the past 2 months. The horse didn't help. It made it worse. Rat in my grill. In my grill in the backyard. Flies in my back lanai. Horrible. Horrible. Just in the past week, graffiti she's written on her fence. I've got a picture. She dictates that 2 fences are going to stop that horse. She keeps her double doors open. Really? 16-hand horse, pretty large. I haven't been around horses a lot, but I know how dangerous they are. I've heard stories, hearsay, but it is what it is. They rip through fences, chest cut out, still running down the horse. Here's another thing, liability. Liability, think about that. Dale gonna handle that? City gonna handle that? That horse breaks out, tramples a child on a road because she don't want to drive. Has that set in yet? That horse dies. Eventually, you got to bury that. Where's he going to do? I don't know. I had a whole list here. I went off topic. I've had conversations with Dale prior to this when he told me that the horse was coming. He said, quote, "I'm not worried. I know the mayor. I know John Penny." And there was a third member. I can't remember the name. I don't want to just spit out a name, but he said, all I need is 3 of 5. And he had it in his pocket. Think about that. 40 years. Come on. Yeah, I'm a little pissed. Excuse my French. I bought that house. That's the house I plan on, living in, dying in, done. Kind of proud of myself. First house I ever bought. 50 years old. I got to deal with this. They got to deal with this. You got to deal with this. It's pretty horrible. I'm sorry, I'm a little upset, but... So, with her breathing treatment issues, dust in the backyard for the horse. Really? I don't think so. I've got allergies. I'm allergic to hay. Go figure. Hay's all over the place now, huh? Yeah. The gates touched on the gates. So in that note that you had, the ADA paperwork, it touches on fraud and charges. Think about that one, because if she's fraud, you can press charges. Okay? Yeah, I lost the topic. So we got a horse. What's next? Circus coming to town? Elephant? I'm not trying to be smart. I'm just thinking about it. I know nobody wants this horse here, but. Was this the one that has the charge thing?
That's a statue.
Yeah.
Statue, who wants the statue? The charges.
I have it.
You have it? You don't need it? Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just. Did I leave anything out?
All right.
I don't know.
Exceed
3 to 5
our
council
time.
members. I overheard Dale talking to his wife one day after the city showed up and said, listen, smack in your hand, you can't have a horse here. So I'm out front having a beer in my garage. Dale and his wife are on the front porch, they're talking, and they're like, wow, now we got to get a letter. Emotional support letter for the horse. Why don't you have one already? Why don't you have one already? I think she's a fraud. I hope she was in here to hear me call her a fraud. And I hope the word charges are brought up in front of her, so it's in her head, so she thinks better. There's nothing she said here tonight that would make me, I mean, I got compassion for her, because I see she's got some kind of issues, not sure what, but my compassion's there. But you're in a neighborhood with kids.
Will you make your summary now, please, Robert?
I'm done, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again real soon.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Tell us your
I'm
name.
Linda Gushu. I live at 1701 Aniston Avenue. I'm the second person, as she said. She talks that she's this very religious person, and the profanity that comes out of her mouth is just, with the whole fraud thing, absolutely 100%. I would stake my reputation on it. She told the mail lady, don't touch my effing trash can, when she moved it out of the way of her driveway so that she could pull in, even though she couldn't drive. She was driving. And her breathing problems with, like you said, her and her husband, they holler constantly. She preaches to the horse through some kind of a speaker, just nonstop, go to church, pray, 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 pray. I'm not I'm a God-fearing person, but come on. And for like 2, 3, one day it was like 4 hours she was back there preaching nonstop in the backyard to this horse. And as far as allergies go, my doctor just had to put me on an emergency inhaler because of the hay. My dog is chewing his feet off because of the hay coming into the backyard. And the poo, she replied, that she says she picks up 7 times a day. It stinks. We're right there. The poor horse looks at us over the fence every morning when we're feeding our birds in the backyard. It's like, please help me, get me out of here. It's the look on his face. It's terrible. I feel bad for him. And then we got fireworks coming up. I know how animals are with fireworks. That horse is going to go crazy. There's no way. And she says she cares about animals. She traveled the country, and now she's got them locked up in a backyard. Really? You care about animals? It's cruel to the horse. And the thing hasn't left the yard in 2 months. It's been in that backyard, and they pee like a gallon whenever they urinate. Am I right? That's what my friend that has horses said. They urinate like a gallon of liquid. And yeah, they just do whatever they want, and they don't care. He told me, he said, Linda, I just want you to let you know we're getting a therapy animal. I said, oh, great, you're going to get a dog. He's like, no. He says, it's a horse. I said, oh, a miniature horse? Because I know this state of Florida allows miniature horses and dogs for emotional support animals. And he says, no, it's a full-size horse. I said, what? He said, you can't have a full-size horse. We moved to Holly Hill because, you hear Holly Hill's got a bad reputation from what I hear. I got a lot of customers that I do in Daytona Beach Shores, and they think, oh, you live in Holly Hill. I said, oh, it's a really nice area. I like it. Neil likes it. That's why we bought our home there. And now, we have these crazy people there that are just screaming and hollering and preaching and these God-fearing signs, stay off the property and don't touch my trash. And it's just crazy. They need to go buy a farm. They can start their own little preaching thing and on some acreage, have support animals for their support animals, and just do whatever. It's not the place. It's not safe. We have a lot of little children walking around. I got my little dog next door. That thing breaks through. He looks over our fence. What's going to stop him from freaking out and going right through the yard? It's not safe. It's going to hurt the animal if he breaks through the fence, and you're going to, they hurt their legs. From what I understand, you have to put them down if they get hurt. I don't know a lot about horses, but anyway, that's, this is just absurd. If you'd asked me a year ago, gee, are you ever going to go to court about a horse in the backyard? Why would I ever do that? That's absurd. Who would bring a horse into a residential area in a backyard that is not fit for livestock, farm animals? So that's my piece. Short, sweet, to the point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Alice Abercrombie, and I also live at 1705 Aniston Avenue, the other side of the neighbors. And whenever my boyfriend asked me to get up and speak, I said, it's going to be hard for me to get up and talk about it because I personally own a horse. I've had a horse since, my horse was like 6 months old when I got it, and he's now 13. I have to pay and drive every day to De Leon Springs, to the ranch where he's located. So I empathize with her. At the same time, I'd love to have my horse in my backyard, but at some point in time, common sense has to step in. These are 1,000-pound animals, 16 hands high. And being at the ranch, I've seen thoroughbreds, which is what she has. I've seen them freak out, bust through fences. I've actually seen one with a broken leg that was limping because it was so scared that it just kept running with a broken leg. So their senses, they just don't think about things like this whenever they're fearful. So my fear is that with this horse being back there, kids are curious. They leave the double gate open, and all you see back there is just the one fence that, the small fence, which is nothing for a small child to open. They go back there, they get in there with this horse. What's going to happen? And sure, they say the horse is fine. I personally know that my grandson has been walked underneath my horse. He's washed my horse's belly and everything else. But my horse, I've had it in the stall, it got spooked one time, and he literally busted through what we call a stud gate, which is steel. And he bent the stud gate, busted the barn door, and ended up in the back of the farm. So I know, as much as I love my horse, and I know that they get crazy. There's no doubt at any given time. Well, if they think their horse is just so great and she's trained it and everything else, we were actually in the backyard and we heard Dale yelling at her to get them kids out of that gate because they had their 3 grandkids back there. He literally flipped out on her. She runs out the gate. Well, me being a horse lover, I'm nosy too, so I look over the gate. She leaves the little gate open. The horse could have literally walked right out of it. Without a doubt, it could have walked out. And so if Dale is that fearful of that horse so he can't allow his own grandkids in there, then why should we subject our children in the neighborhood to that same? And when we spoke with Dale, and Dale said something about bringing the horse over, he says, well, I'd rather ask for forgiveness. I'd rather ask for, I don't know how it went, something about permission and forgiveness. So in other words, he's going to do what he wants to, and he'll ask for forgiveness later. So we know. And again, out of convenience and it costs me a mint as well to keep my horse boarded and go there every day and feed it and care for it. Should I put my horse in my backyard? You know, and I did a little research after the fact, and I know that there's horses that are in small areas like the one that she has in, there's show horses, but these are horses that gets out and gets exercises. And as a horse lover and a horse owner, I don't think it's fair to the horse. You know, she talks about that she loves this horse. If she really loved the horse, then she would do what's right for the horse, not what's right for her. I think, you know, with therapy or whatever it is that she needs, that she can get over it. But this horse, it's eventually just going to deteriorate in that backyard. It's just not fair to the horse.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? All right. Board, do we have any questions, comments? No question, no comment. All right. Do I have a motion? Well, I was just going to read it to you. How about that? I was working on it. I was trying to get to that page. I don't know why. I'm looking for Joe's.
Can I help you with anything, Chairman?
I was looking for, I lost your page that I won. Staff recommendation page. Somehow I can't put my fingers on it.
Staff, I have it up on the overhead.
Yeah, well, I can't read that there, so tell me what page it's on in this handout, the packet.
5.1?
5.1. Well, that's where I'm at. I'm sorry, I had it. I was looking right at it. I would entertain a motion to recommend that the requester has not met the substantial burden of demonstrating disability-related therapeutic need to have a full-size horse reside on a single-family residential property amongst single-family homes.
I would make a motion to go with what staff's the reading there.
recommendation.
That
Okay.
they have not met the criteria for it.
All right.
Second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the question.
Robin Hanger,
Yes.
Tony Casada,
Yes.
Loretta Arthur,
Yes.
Dennis Smith,
Yes.
Mike Meyer.
Yes. So then, they will come to the, when's the commission meeting?
So this will be brought in front of the City Commission at the May 24th meeting.
May 24th. So the commission meeting, May 24th,
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Now, when it is on the agenda, that's when the meeting starts.
All righty. We'll have a short recess, if that's all right with everyone. Anyone that'd like to go may go. Anyone that needs to go to the bathroom may go. I need a drink. Can't leave.